Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Tutorial Tuesday with Shono. We are doing something I've never done before. I'm going to be critiquing your artwork. Hold on, let me get things a little better situated here. Alright. I think that'll do. Okay. Alright, so like I said, I'm going to be critiquing your artwork today. We have 6 artists who were very kind to send me their artwork. A few of them sent a few pieces in, but I'm going to just focus on one piece per person. I'm kind of just going to go through, tell you what you're doing good, what you can improve on. Spoilers, it's about hands for everyone. but we'll get to all of that. But before we get started, if you guys are enjoying the stream, feel free to follow it. If you really enjoy the stuff and you want to donate, help me keep on making art and streams, feel free to donate. There's all things down below that you can click on: Patreon, Ko-fi, PayPal. And I think that's it. Well, cool. We already got Green Count in there and Gothic Lolita Angel. Hey guys, how you doing? I hope this is helpful. We're gonna go through. I didn't really pick any particular order here. I just kind of just put all the artwork in my tabs here. I might. We'll see. We'll see how things go. I'm gonna start with this one here, the Through the Looking Glass piece here by Dylan, and then I might jump around. So we'll see how things go. Hey, Sideways is there. How you doing? All right. So first things first. Let's first turn this to blue so it's easy for me to draw over, and you guys can see what I'm doing. All right. So for this Through the Looking Glass piece, there's a lot that's going really good for it. Like, the pose is really good for both of these characters. They have this really nice twist and energy for this figure. The looking over the shoulder. We have a nice, kind of like an S line of action moving through the body here. The anatomy, for the most part, is pretty strong, and the face actually is pretty good too. It's kind of small, so for me to nitpick such a small drawn face is a little cruel of me. But the anatomy is there. The face is in the right place. The eyes, nose, and mouth have the right shape. So it will come back to what needs improvements here. This piece, this character here, also has a really great S shape to the line of action, going from the highest point here, moving all the way to the to the lowest part. We have a good curve there, and then we have a nice S shape there. So that's having a really strong line of action does a lot of good for your figure drawing. And same thing with the face. The face has a pretty good anatomy. It looks like, as I zoom in here, the eyes are a little uneven, and the lips could use a little work, but we'll talk a little bit more in detail in a second with that. All right. Before we actually get into anatomy, what I want to talk about is the line quality here. Now, when you're doing line art, you want to make sure that you really have it's a good way to put it, a variety of line weight in your piece. You don't want all the lines to be the same thickness. And for the most part, all these lines are about the same thickness. Now, it does look like there's a thicker line on the outline than on the inside, but seems like there's only really 2 types of lines here. But more importantly, you can see how jagged these lines are. Now, the artist who did this, Dylan, I know a little bit about him, and I know he has a condition that might sometimes inhibit his ability to draw smooth lines. So I'm not 100% sure if that was affecting these lines, or if he was doing something I see very often with artists that are doing pen work, and they want to do a lot of like short strokes. Hold on, let me switch my pen up here. Okay, so I see it very often, like artists that want to kind of do like really short strokes, and when they do those short strokes, you get this kind of jagged line. Come on, you're doing all right. There we go. So if you do a lot of like short strokes, you don't have a really smooth line, and that's what it looks like is happening here. I'm not obviously I didn't watch the artist create this, so I don't know for sure, but I think you see how I'm doing these really short strokes, and it's kind of simulating the line work that I see in this this piece here. So instead of doing short strokes like that, you want to try to elongate your stroke. Now I know the way the camera's sitting on me, you can't see how my arm is moving across the screen, but basically I'm going to be trying to make a motion like moving my whole arm up and down. Like I don't want to just move my fingers, because you're going to limit the range of motion you can do there. So if you do short strokes, you're going to have that, but if you move your whole arm, you can do one solid line here. So if I was inking over here, one stroke, moving my whole arm, no, that doesn't mean you can't do like move your arm and then do like a little like wrist flick at the end. Like if I'm doing here one stroke and then maybe a little twist of my wrist at the end there. Lower the opacity here just a little bit. So hopefully you can see while I'm doing this how moving my whole arm gives you much smoother line work and line quality. And then if you combine that with varying up the line weight, like starting maybe thin in some spots, getting thicker, and then thinning back out, you can have a much more interesting looking line work here. So that's that with line quality. So now let's talk anatomy for a second. And just so you guys know, I'm trying to plan roughly about 10 minutes on each of these pieces, with a little wiggle room to go along if I have a lot to say on it. So just so you know, there's going to be about 10 minutes on each piece, 10 to 15 we'll say. So, all right. So, anatomy. The proportions look good here. If I measure the distance here of the head, if I measure that distance, the next head length down should be about where the chest is. And that's about right. So the next head length down should be about where the belt line or the waist should be. So that's right about there. So that seems good. Now you can't really see the legs. But, so head, chest, mid-thigh should be right about there. Bottom of the knee should be right about here. And it looks like the leg kind of comes back this way. So that seems like it's all right. And so the shin should be there. And the foot should be there. Yeah, so the leg might be a little bit long. But it looks like the proportions are good on this figure. So, excuse me. Uh, what does need a little bit of work is definitely the hands, but let's work our way up to the hands. Let's do the arm here. So we have the muscles are the correct shape here. We have the shoulder muscle overlapping the bicep. We have kind of the armpit here. We have the tricep going into the elbow. So that's all looking good. It looks like the bicep has a weird dent in there. So the bicep should really just be one curve. Like that. The general shape of the forearm is good here. It's wider at the front, gets skinnier towards the wrist. But you want to have a little bit of an overlap, because our forearm kind of overlaps our bicep a little bit here. So you want to have this forearm overlap the bicep just a little. So it looks something like that. Actually, and I forgot to check the measurements here. From the elbow to the shoulder should be just slightly bigger than the head. Yep, and it looks like it is. Okay, so that's good. So let's zoom in a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure what's going on here. I can see the hand, but this hand here doesn't look like it's holding the scepter. And this hand looks like it's kind of holding the scepter, but it looks a little off. So let's start with this hand here. The general shape looks good. We have our kind of flat top. We have our knuckles here. And then it looks like the thumb is coming off this way. Now, it goes a little too far on this side. You can trim that down. So that hand would, from the position you're drawing it at, would look something like that. So not too different. Let's pass it a little bit more. So that's the hand there. And how I would draw it. So not too far off. Now this hand here, again, I'm not 100% sure what's happening there, but if we were drawing our scepter, going this way, coming back this way, that means the hand here, the backhand, the thumb would have to sit right about here, because the scepter has to sit in the palm of the hand. So that means the thumb has to be on one side of it. And the exact grip you can decide as an artist. There's no one right way to this. I might make the thumb do something like that. And then the fingers would have to wrap around it, so probably you would see the most of the pinky here. You'd see a little bit less of the ring finger. Less here, or I keep saying less, but less of it would be wrapped around the scepter. You would still see a lot of the fingers here. And then just a little bit of the index finger. This little mark is here, but that's fine. time have we spent on this here? About 10 minutes. I think I'll spend just a couple minutes more just talking about that other figure. And then we'll move on to our next one. Oh, and let me actually mention the face real quick. The shape of the face is good. We have the cheekbone. The cheekbone comes out probably a little further than it needs to. And all the shapes here are pretty good, but the eyes aren't in line. If I draw a straight line across here, those eyes don't quite line up. So either one eye needs to come down or the other eye needs to come up. I'd probably raise up this eye. You want to make sure the eyes are on the same line. The nose is halfway between the eyes and the chin, and the mouth is halfway between the nose and the chin. And the lips, remember that the top lip overlaps the bottom lip a little bit. So if that's our top lip here, it means it has to overlap the bottom lip a little bit, so it's not going to connect at the corners. It's going to kind of fold underneath it. All right. I'll move over here real quick. I had more than I thought I had to say about this. Actually, I have two more things to say. One, the hands here, again, look a little wonky. We have the pinky side. It looks like the fingers are very thick here. So we probably want to thin those out. And make sure we have a distinction between the pinky side and the thumb side. Without having any kind of reference, I'm kind of winging this here. That still looks a little funky. Remember that the palm, so from the wrist to where the fingers start here, is the same distance as from the beginning of the fingers to the middle finger. And all of that equals the size of the face. So let me double check here. So measuring the size of the face, that means the hand should be there halfway. So that means the knuckles should actually be there. But that's the pinky side, not the first finger side. So I have to make that shorter. Well, that's not quite the hand position I would go with if I was drawing this, but it's at least better than it was. And then this hand here, it starts off good, but the thumb kind of does this weird like loopy thing, when all it would do is just pretty much come across and then down. And just kind of draw the fingers kind of the way you have them. There you go. Got a good gripping hand there. Alright, and the last thing I want to talk about with this piece, and then I'm going to move on, is just the way that the fabric should be moving. When you're drawing fabric, you don't want to just draw random lines. You want to really determine the folds here and how the folds are moving. So if I was drawing this piece here, I'd probably, since there's a little bit of a twist happening to the skirt, I'd probably pick a couple large folds here. a little bit better. And probably leave it at that. You don't want to add too much. If you add too many lines, it's not going to look like folds in the skirt. It's going to just look like it's wrinkly, and it should get ironed. So same thing with this skirt over here. This one has less of a twist, but because this leg is kind of coming out this way, that means that it's going to pull the fabric. So the fabric is going to get this kind of stretching look going from this corner to the edge. Be a little bit of a bunching on this, on top of the leg here. So something like that. All right, and I think that's all I'm going to say about this piece for right this second. Unless, Dylan, I don't know if you're in the chat right now, but if you're in the chat and you have any questions, now is a good time to throw in a question if you want me to follow up on anything I just said. I know there's always a lag, so I'm going to wait a second. Oh, and one last thing, Dylan, if you are watching, proofread your stuff because you have you mixed up the G and the H in on through there. So make sure you proofread your stuff before you send it to print. So I'm going to get the next one set up here, and again, Dylan, if you're in the chat and you have a question, ask me, and I'll come back in a sec to that. So who do we have? We have Green Count and Gothic Lolita Angel. Let's do Green Count. Let's do your piece next here. All right, so switch this to blue. That's what I'm doing. Okay. There we are. All right. So how are we doing so far? Is this helpful? I can just work with this Green Count. I don't think there's a problem with this. Because we're going to be talking, we could talk a little bit about color, but I think we'll focus mostly on the drawing here. So I know you drew this based off of, is it Kayla? Kayla Aaron's cosplay of Vampirella. Actually, I think I have. Did I pull up her drawing? Okay, so we got. All right, so first let's say what the good stuff here. So, you have a pretty dynamic pose. Her torso leans further to the right on her hand side. Let me pull up the reference here. Let's see what you're talking about. Yeah, well, okay. If I'm going to critique this as not so much as you trying to reproduce the photo that you're using your reference, but I'm going to critique this as its own thing, as its own drawing. The fact that you have her leaning kind of in a different direction, that's not important. What is important is just the general drawing, and that's what I'm going to focus on here. So the first thing that you did great is you do have this dynamic pose. You have this. She's leaning. She doesn't look like a cardboard cutout that's just like a mannequin that you just kind of pose. She does look like it feels like she's reaching out with that arm. That arm's up. It looks like she could be, using her powers. Um, uh, the hands, you picked a very tricky hand position to draw, and we're going to talk about how to improve it. But I commend you on the attempt. Hands, especially complex hands where they're doing these kind of intricate things, is very difficult. So that's pretty good. All right, so on to how we can improve this. So the first thing that stood out to me was the proportions. So assuming we're not drawing in any kind of cartoony or stylized style, if we're trying to go more realistic, we measure our head here. Oh, helps if I draw in the right layer. All right, so if you measure from the top of the head to the chin here, and you go one distance down, it should be right about the bottom of the chest. So if I measure one head length down, that's about one head length down there. So that should be about the bottom of her chest there. Another head length down should be right about her waist, or like where her belt would sit. So that would be right about here. So it looks like, it doesn't look like so much like you got her body proportions wrong, but it looks like her head is just a little bit bigger. So like, let's say where's my lasso here? So if I lassoed her head and just kind of shrunk it a little bit, I think that would fix that problem pretty easily. So if we go one head length down, the bottom of the chest, that looks about right, and then the waist, yeah. So if we shrink her head down to about that size, that solves that first thing. Because so if I measure here, measure head lengths from the bald head for proportions. That's a good way to do it. And the hair does make the head look a little bit bigger. So, but if let's see, so from here, so from here, let's say without her hair, the top of the head would be about there. So if I measure that distance, go one head length down, so that would be right about there, so that seems about right. And then the next head length down would be about where her waist or belt line would be, and that's right about there, so that works. And then the next head length down should be about mid-thigh, and that's right about there, so that works. So yeah, the head was just a little big. And actually this actually inadvertently fixes another problem I was going to say when we talked about the hands. The hands looked a little small, and because our hand is as big as our face. So by shrinking the head, now without having to change the hands at all, the hands now look bigger compared to the face. So that kind of fixes that problem as well at the same time. So that's good. All right, so the rest of this is, for the most part, good. Of course, and I'm included in this, we can always get better, we can always get stronger at our anatomy. But since I have only a little bit of time, per each one, I can't spend an hour per drawing. But again, things you did well, like you really got how the armpit here goes over the shoulder, and how the bicep and tricep kind of go this way, and then have the forearm come around. And that overlapping is really strong, and how you have it going from the armpit into the chest. That's actually really good too. A very common mistake artists make is they think the chest, it doesn't matter if it's male or female, are kind of connected to the collarbone, when in fact they're connected to the armpits. So the fact that you have that going on there, that looks really good. And overall, the face looks really good too. The lips could use a little work. You kind of did the same thing Dylan did, where the bottom lip is kind of connected to the corner of the upper lip. When, if I'm looking here, I'm looking at Kayla's reference, I can kind of see why you did it this way, looking at the photograph. But you want it to just be a little bit out past the bottom lip. It doesn't have to be by a lot, but just a little bit. And then her top lip kind of comes up like this. And you see a little bit of her teeth. Very, very little, but it's there. All right. So now, let's talk about the bane of everyone's existence, the hands. So let's start with this hand down here. So this part, and I these hands are very hard to draw, these hand positions. And the reference picture you're working from, you don't get to really zoom in a whole lot on the hands to get the subtle details. So this isn't something that I want you to beat yourself up over. But let's see here. So the first thing, the thumb for the most part is pretty good. If I was drawing this hand, I would probably make the thumb just a little bit longer. Not by a lot, but just a little bit. Let's see. So the way you have the hand here, it looks like we're seeing a lot of the side of the hand and the bottom of the hand at the same time. So I think we need to pick one. So I think what we're going to do is reduce the bottom of the hand we see here. So I would make this just a little bit smaller, although the shape you have is right. It's going to kind of curve in and be a little bit bigger towards the wrist here, so that shape is correct. I would just make it a little bit smaller. Now, looking at your reference here, the hand, the first finger doesn't curve in as much as you have it. So, actually, before we get too into this, let me define where the fingers should be connecting. And if you remember what I said in the last critique there, so the distance from the wrist to the palm here, so from here to here, should be the same length as the middle finger. So it looks like that's going to be about right. So I think you got the middle finger pretty strong here. The first finger, I wouldn't bend so far in, like it really curves here. It does have a bend, but I don't think I would make it bend as far. Let's see, so the next finger, the ring finger actually bends down quite a bit this way. So it kind of is pretty parallel with our middle finger here, but then it makes a bend and comes down about this far. And then the pinky comes down as well, almost parallel, and then kind of has a little bit of a curve this way. Now, okay, so I'm going to get rid of that drawing, the underdrawing, your drawing, just so I can kind of clean this up a little bit, so I'm not distracted. Let's see how I'm doing on time here. right, we're about 10 minutes in. So maybe I'll do 15 minutes on each drawing. I said 10, but it looks like we're getting close to 15 on each one. I got nowhere else to be, right? I can spend more time here. So, man, even I'm struggling here with this hand. You picked a real tough hand to draw. So we want to make sure we have a little bit of space between the ring finger and the pinky here. Ah, I see my own mistake I was making. So, looking at the reference, the ring finger overlaps the pinky just a little bit. So if we have the ring finger kind of coming down, and then the pinky comes across like this. There we go. Which means it still looks funny. It looks a little bit better, but still looks funny. Such a weird hand gesture. There we go. Yeah, that looks a bit better. Now if I had the time to really spend like getting this hand perfect, what things I would focus on next would be getting the folds in the fingers just right, and getting how the nails kind of just slightly protrude over here. I would focus on that next. So let's talk about this hand a little bit, and then I'm going to move on to our next drawing. Now this hand still has a little bit of it's still a bit weird. It's a weird position. Now if you look at the hand reference, though you can see the bottom of the hand here, the arm is coming up, and then the wrist is here, and so we see a little bit of the top of the hand. The hand is doing more of a downward position than an up position. And so we have our fingers that are attached here. People are emailing me. That never happens. All right. So you actually got this forefinger looking pretty good. I wouldn't make the under the padding of the fingers, I wouldn't make those so pronounced. Her fingers are pretty curved, so like it's going to be very subtle, so it almost feels like there's just one solid curve there. Same thing with this finger, although because of foreshortening you're not going to see a whole lot of it. It's going to kind of come up from this back knuckle here, and then kind of create this kind of cylinder-like shape. All right. And this finger does come way down. I don't even know how she did that gesture. That's crazy. But again, the weakest part of this hand isn't so much the position of the hand, but each section you've really over exaggerated each part of the finger. And some people's hands are like that. Some people do have very pronounced joints in their hands, but Kayla here does not. So I would kind of smooth that out, kind of bring the finger forward a little bit. It does come down almost as far down as the thumb, which is, again, weird. I don't think I could do that hand gesture too well. And then her pinky kind of comes out and is really foreshortened. And coming out this way. And of course, we don't see too much of the pinky side here, but we see a lot of the thumb coming down. Man, such weird hand gestures. I think that'll mostly get it accurate though. I would actually probably bring this in just a little bit. It's a little bit better. Yeah, not bad. So I think that brings us to about 15 minutes, a little over, no biggie for that. So Green Count, I'll give you a second if you have any questions that you want me to follow up on. Go ahead and leave those in the chat. I'll happily answer them for you if I didn't address something you really wanted me to talk about. Or if you were just confused about what I said about anything in particular. So go ahead and leave a chat if you have that, have anything to say. And while I wait, because I know there's a lag, I'm going to pull up Gothic Lolita Angel's piece here. No problem. I'm glad I can help. Gothic Lolita Angel, if you're there watching, I do have a question before I get started. Your comic page here, is it meant to be read from left to right or right to left? While I wait for a reply there, I will start saying the things I do like about this page. So the thing about comic book pages is I love comics, and I could probably spend an entire 3-hour stream just talking about mechanics of comics, how comics work. I just love comics. I love talking about them. There's such a complicated piece of media. You don't think they would be, but there's a lot that goes into a comic. You are there. Awesome. So am I supposed to read the comic from left to right, going from panel... Whoops. Going from panel... like, going this way? Or am I supposed to read it going this way? Because depending on which way I'm supposed to read it, changes kind of what I have to say about it. Right to left. Okay. Okay, so my first advice here is, since this comic is in English, I'm assuming it's not a translation of a Japanese comic, that this comic originally is in English. That's the original language of this comic. If I'm right in presuming that, you want your comic to read in the same direction as the language. So since this is an English comic, and we read English from left to right, you want your panels to read from left to right. Yes, okay, good. So a very common mistake, and I have to tell a lot of my students this, and a lot of them don't know. So if you already know this, I apologize. But the reason why Japanese manga reads from right to left isn't because that's inherent to the art form of manga. It's because that's the direction that Japanese language reads. The Japanese language reads from top to bottom, and then from right to left. So if this was Japanese text, you would start here, read that line down, move to the right. So that's why manga reads from right to left. It's because that's the way their language reads. Since we're English speakers and we're making a comic in English, English goes from left to right, and you want your comic panels to go the same direction that you read in. And the main reason you want to do this above all else is because you don't want to confuse your reader. Just like how I was a little confused, I wasn't quite sure the right way to read this. If you put it in the same direction that the language reads in, you won't have that confusion. So that's thing number one. All right, thing number two. Well, actually, let's back it up one sec. What you did really well is making these panels very clean and easy to read. You didn't try anything crazy, fancy, putting the panels in any kind of weird order. Personally wanted to do it from right to left. I also follow others also do it. Yeah, I know a lot of people do it in that format, but it can be very confusing. That's why I recommend against it. But when all is said and done, you're just gonna do it the way you want. So I'm just giving you the a technical reason to make that choice. So back to the panels, I see very often, students who want to start making panels, but they're afraid to make it in a grid format. So they start making like really crazy panel layouts, trying to be really creative and fancy, and it gets confusing. So the fact that you cut this in an easy to read panel that goes very clearly in the Z format here is great. It's perfect. Don't stop doing that. All right. So as far as things to improve here, the biggest thing that caught me when I was reading this was the lack of backgrounds. I know backgrounds are tough. Oh, hold on. Let's see. I see. It will be challenging to send over. When you send it to print, make sure that you find a printer that will print it backwards for you. You don't want to accidentally, if you created it to be printed from right to left, and you send it to a printer and they print it in the English left to right style, you're going to have a comic that's completely backwards. So really be careful when you're sending it to the printer. Okay, so as far as backgrounds go, the reason why backgrounds are so important is because it tells us where the characters are in relationship to each other. Like when I was looking through this page, I have no idea where they are. I don't know. There's just like a white void. We have these cool action lines. I like that, and I like how we have the surround here. But I don't know, are they in the forest? Are they in a spaceship? Are they in an ancient temple? There's nothing here that tells me where they are and where they are in relationship to each other. Yeah, I'm talking about backgrounds right now. Yeah, so we do in this panel down here, we get a little bit of a background, and that's good. But we don't see enough of the background for me to know what I'm looking at. So in comics, or in any kind of visual media, you want to have an establishing shot. Now, to be fair, I haven't seen the other pages, so maybe you really create a good establishing shot prior to this page. And that's good if you do, but you want to give them a little bit of background here and there. Hold on a sec, let me pull up an example of one of my comic pages here. Alright, so that's loading up here. I have too many windows open. To start attempting to do more backgrounds in later pages due to that very fear. Yeah, you do want to be you don't want people to get confused. So like, here's a comic book page that I've done. There is a background in just about every panel. The importance of it is it lets you know where the characters are in relationship, not only to each other, but to the space that they're in. And this particular example does have some sort of background in every panel. You don't need one in every single panel, but you need them in at least half the panels need to have a background, especially if any kind of action is happening. We'll get to these in a sec. So since we don't have any sense of background, when the action's happening, I'm not quite sure where they are in the space, how they're moving, and all that. So definitely do that. Consider having more backgrounds. I forgot to time this one, so I don't know how long I've been talking about this. Let's see. Alright, so the other thing you just want to do when you do the backgrounds, when you do the backgrounds, you really want to also make sure you take into account perspective. And I did perspective last week, in last week's live stream. But perspective not only will make the background feel more believable, but you'll make sure that your characters don't look like they're floating next to each other. Like this character here, it looks like we're looking straight at that character, but it also looks like we're looking straight at this character, and because of that, it makes it look like this character is floating. Where if I was to draw this here, let me create I'm not going to build the whole grid out here, but let's say if she's going up here, the vanishing point would probably be up here. So by adding in just a little bit of a background, I didn't even put in any details, but I have a single vanishing point. Everything's kind of moving towards that vanishing point. The perspectives, of course I'm doing this on the fly here, so it's not as strong as it should be, but I'll erase where it overlaps. But now you can see with just a simple addition, it doesn't look like this character's floating anymore. It looks like they're running down a sidewalk or a floor plan or something like that. Oh, you've been chatting. Hold on, let me get caught up here. even though you don't understand perspective that well. Well, I suggest if you want to learn a little bit more with perspective, I did do that on last week's stream, and I posted. It should be available still here on Twitch, but I also posted it on YouTube as well. Keep that in mind. Very good. So, and that goes with all this. Like, let's say we have our characters up here. Let's say we do, since we're looking down on the characters, if we do kind of like a 2-point perspective, you could even do a 3-point perspective. That would look super cool, but without having to redraw any of your characters. So the vanishing point would probably be here and over here, which means that line's off. No, I'm not saying necessarily draw a grid for your backgrounds, but I'm basically just demonstrating how even adding a very simple background goes a very long way with helping the comic feel more like a real place, like a real environment. And then, let's see. So the very, very last thing I think I'll talk about here with this one is one small thing about the panel layout. I really like this grid that you're doing, but then this last panel right here kind of confused me a little bit. Because, and this might go back to the, this might go back to backgrounds, but because I'm not quite sure what's happening here in this top section, and then we move down to this bottom, and we have this inset panel, which is fine. Inset panels are great. And then clearly, with this background here, I can only assume it's a different place because it looks different than the rest of the panels. But I don't know where they are. So what I probably would have done is, instead of making this a big curved panel, I would have just made it a regular square inset panel. Maybe just something like that. That just, whoops. That just sits in there. And then maybe have an establishing shot. Again, I'm not exactly sure where this change might have happened. Maybe an establishing shot isn't appropriate for the situation. But most of the time when you change your change locations, you want to have an establishing shot first. If I go from being in the Batcave to the Joker's lair, and they just go on the same page, to just go from one to the other without establishing that we're changed locations, it's going to confuse the audience. So if you go from outside to inside, you want to show, okay, this is the new location we're in, whether it means showing a picture of the building, showing a picture of the woods, or the spaceship, or the moon, or wherever we're going, showing a picture of that, and then showing the action that's happening at that location. Even if it means, even if like there's not like an actual building we can show, maybe it's just like a big room. Show the room as a whole and show everything that's in that room, show everyone that's in that room, and then you can zoom in on whoever's talking or wherever the action might be. It's supposed to be an immediate change. Oh, I see. Okay, so you might want to. It might have been a little bit stronger to actually show like them seeing, like actually watching the TV, like maybe a little more over the shoulder, where we see the television on the wall or on wherever the TV is, and we're looking over the shoulder of that character, because it looks like we're trying to keep the identity of this character secret here, or at least not obvious. So we can still keep that by looking over the shoulder at the TV, and we know exactly what he's doing there. So I think, and then on top of all of that, just keep practicing normal, the stuff we all need to keep practicing. Hands, anatomy, faces. It's something that I still need to practice. The greatest artist in the world still needs to practice it because it's hard. And everyone still needs to get better at it. But as far as your storytelling, I think that hits all the major parts that I wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, now's a good time to ask if you want me to elaborate or if I wasn't clear on anything. Yeah, go ahead and ask if you have any questions or want me to elaborate on anything. And I hope it's been helpful. What I might do in the future, because a lot of these are great pieces, and I wish I could talk about them more. What I might do is, in the future, I might just pick one thing and just do a whole stream on one drawing. That way, you guys can get the attention that these pieces of art really deserve. I feel like I'm not giving them the time that they really need. You're very welcome. I really hope it helped. And it's really keep in mind the orientation, because it's tough. It's really tough when you're an English speaker to make manga, because manga just means comics. So how does someone know how you're supposed to read it? And so that's why it's always safe to go left to right if you're writing the comic in English. That way, it's always a safe bet. Someone who sees something in English, the first thing they want to do is read it from left to right. So it'll prevent that from becoming an issue. But since you've already started, you're going to have to, for lack of a better term, do some soul searching to figure out which what is the best to continue for your piece and for your comic. But okay, good. And I guess I should say, you could just flip the panels around. They used to do that with old manga, like old Sailor Moon when it was first printed. You're not sure that it will look right. That's exactly why they stopped doing that in the old Japanese manga. Like if you pick up a Sailor Moon comic that was printed in the early 90s, it'll read from left to right, and because they flipped the artwork around. But out of respect for the artists and how they originally created the art, they stopped doing that. That's the other reason why we read manga from right to left here in America. But it's worth at least investigating, taking a look at, and seeing how it goes. Good luck. I guess that's the best I can say, because it's tough. It's really tough. Alright, so let's move on here. And I should say, for everyone that's watching and is in the chat, just because I'm not reviewing your artwork, if you have questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to do it in the chat. It's not strictly, this is your piece and only you can ask questions about it. Everyone who's watching, feel free to ask a question if you have a question. So, all right, next piece here by Josh. Good old Spider-Man. So this has a nice dynamic pose. We have a nice, the line of action here, the body curves real good. That's really important with Spider-Man. You need that line of action. If you don't have a line of action, Spider-Man's going to look stiff and boring, and he won't look like Spider-Man. So that line of action is really good, really important, and I'm glad to see it there. Uh, is the proportions look right? Let me double check here. So we got the top of the head to the bottom here. Now this is a little tough because of how he's bending. So let's see. The chest should be about there. It looks like it's about there. The waist. He put the waist there. I probably... I might put the waist a little bit lower. But it's tough because he is kind of crunching up. So it's hard to follow the proportions exactly when we get into these action poses. We'll just go with it for now. If it is off, it's not off by a lot, so it's easy to forgive. So let's get into the actual anatomy here. So the first thing I would say is you can really lose the muscle structure in some parts here. So the head actually looks really good, and the shoulders looks good here on both sides. But just like when we were talking about Vampirella here, the shoulders go into the chest. And that's got to happen here too. So the shoulders here have to go into the chest muscles. Now it's kind of implied in this, but it's not really well defined. And in some cases that would be okay. But maybe I'm going to have a little bit of a personal bias, but if we're talking superheroes, I feel like it's important to have those muscles there. So now, before we go into torso, let's do these arms. Our arms are slightly longer from shoulder to elbow than our head. So if I measure Spider-Man's head here again, go from shoulder to elbow, it should go right about there. Now there is going to be a little bit of foreshortening happening because the arm's kind of going back, but the way that this arm is drawn, it doesn't really feel like foreshortening because the two sides of the arm are pretty parallel. If it was being foreshortened, it would be a little bit more extreme. It would be more like this. And then you can forgive it being shorter than the head there. And whenever you do foreshortening, each part of the body overlaps the next part after that. So the shoulder has to overlap the bicep. The bicep is going to overlap the forearm here, or at least part of the forearm. And then the forearm overlaps the hand. The hand kind of goes off the page there, but it works. And each part has to get smaller. I kind of forgot my own foreshortening here. Now, with this arm here, it looks like it's going more up than away, so there's definitely not going to be any foreshortening there. So if I measure again the distance of the head, shoulders to the elbow should be right about there, maybe a little bit past it. Let's get a layer underneath here. So we're getting there. So I'm going to... So if our shoulders are here, that means the arm has to connect here. The bicep is going to actually be facing down a little bit, which means the tricep is going to be facing out and away. That looks a little bit better. Oops. Erased the wrong layer there. There we are. All right. Then we have kind of our back. This kind of curve isn't really the body. I mean, it's the body, but it's not the side of the body. It's our back. This here. So this is a back muscle. And this is our side here. And so we have these. If we're drawing Spider-Man, we don't really need to draw these, but I figure since we're talking anatomy, let's talk about it. So we have these little muscles here on our sides that kind of go into where our stomach muscles are. There we go. And again, if I was lengthening this body, which I probably would if I was drawing, probably put the waist right about there. Just putting Spidey's head to make this make a little bit more sense. Alright, so now let's talk about the legs a little bit. The leg shape overall is correct, but they're not even. Like this leg here is much skinnier than this leg here. You want to try to keep it the same thickness. Now our leg muscles are very curved on the top and more flat on the inside here. With the foreshortening here, we want to make sure we have this curved leg here. Looks pretty good. Now the legs coming in, the shins are kind of the opposite. The shins are more flat on the front and more curved on the back. So since it's more flat on the front here, I'll draw it flat there, more flat there. And then curved on the back side. So I'm going to draw that curve, which looks like Josh got for the most part. And you want to make sure that the thighs and the calves or the upper and lower parts of the leg are about equal in size. So if I measure from the ankle to the knee, that should be about the same size as from the knee to the hips. And it looks like that's the case here. So let me double check here. So from the knees to about where the hips are, it's going to be the same size from the knee to the ankle. So I would actually want to put the ankle about there for this leg. And you want to keep in mind when you do the feet, the heel actually starts behind the ankle. Now this foot looks pretty good for the most part. And since it gets cut off here, I have a tough time having anything to critique. But if I was drawing it myself, I'd put the heel behind the ankle and kind of maybe do something like that. Not quite. I think what I would do, since this leg is probably coming, if I was drawing this, if I wanted this leg to maybe come up more, I think I would have a little bit more foreshortening happening here. So I would probably have put the knee right about there. And then have it bend back this way. Something like that. Again, we have our ankles here. The heels sit behind the ankle. So that's pretty much what I would do with the Spider-Man for the most part here. Do a little bit more muscle work there. So by and large, this was pretty good. Just a little weakness in the muscle structure, which, in my personal opinion, is vital to Spider-Man. If you don't get Spider-Man's muscles, they get those lean, get that lean strength that is Spider-Man. You kind of lose his essence in there. So, Josh, I don't know if you're watching, if you're in the chat. But if you are and you have any questions or you want me to follow up with anything, now's a good time. And we'll move on to the next. So we've done Dylan. Done, it's a green count here. We did Rita. All right. So now we're going to do Shao's champion here. And I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right. I always say it's Shao's in my head, Shaoz. But if I'm not saying it right, I apologize. You can correct me when you see this. Okay, so how's everyone doing before I jump ahead? I feel like I'm going like a million miles an hour, so if I need to slow down, you guys let me know. Let me know to just calm down, slow down if I need to. I just want to make sure I get through all of these, so try not to rush, but anyway. Alright, so let's talk about this character. I really like the power in this pose. It's very strong. I like the character design. The weakness in it really falls in the hand. Doing good. Alright, good. So when I draw on over this, I'm going to kind of pretend these curly pieces of hair, whoops, are not going to be there, because I think it's an interesting design element for the character, but for this particular drawing, I think it's distracting from the anatomy. Oh, the stream dropped a little bit. Well, as long as I'm still live right now, that's all that matters. Sometimes I do get, at least once per stream, I usually have some trouble with it dropping or just me getting disconnected. But as long as I'm still alive, I'm going to keep on going. Okay, so let's talk like what I've talked about with everyone else here. Let's talk proportions. So from the top of the head to the bottom of the head there, if I measure that, next head length down should be about the chest, which is here, or bottom of the chest. So that's working. That's working real well. Next head length down should be about the belt line, which is right. So next head length down is here. So I might be a little low. Maybe the body needs to be stretched out a little bit, but it's not so off that it's a big problem. You can get away with this. And then the next head length down should be about middle of the thigh. That's right about here. That looks like it works. And then the next head length down should be the bottom of the knee. We can't really see the bottom of the knee for the straight leg. It should be about there. I would guess that's about where the knee goes. So it looks like the proportions are pretty strong. There is a little bit of a problem with the arms, and we'll talk about that in a sec here. So if we draw our head here, we have our neck. Again, I'm drawing this as if those hair pieces are not going to be there. So I'm guessing it looks like the shoulder is right about there and there. So, for as thick as this character is, I don't think the shoulders should be that narrow. If this character was a little bit of more of a scrawny character, I would definitely say that's fine. But since this character is just so thick in general, like big arms, just big body in general, I think the shoulders should maybe come out to about here. And I can't tell because we have our hair thingies in the way, but the chest, like I've mentioned a couple times already, you want to make sure they start in the armpits here. So if the arms are here, the armpits are will be about there. So the chest you want to come out this way. So I'm not 100% sure. I feel like that might be an issue, but again, with the hair in the way, it's hard to tell for sure. So you just want to make sure when you're drawing your characters, make sure that the chest, and again, it doesn't matter if it's male or female, the chest connects to the armpits. So make sure that you have them connected properly here. So for the rest of the body here, this part kind of has a weird lump in there. So I'm not exactly sure what was going on when you drew that. I get that she's kind of bending over, and so maybe the body is kind of creating a fold there. And that's fine if that's what you're going for, but it doesn't read that way, at least not in this drawing. So I would probably just smooth that out a little bit. It looks fine on this side. And if that is supposed to be kind of like the body folding because of the twist, I would definitely look at some reference to see how that might look on different people's bodies. Because again, it just looks like a weird indentation there. It doesn't feel like a fold. So, is that. The legs, for the most part, look good. They're curved on the outside. They could be a little bit straighter on the inside. Because if we look at the muscle structure of a leg real quick, we have one muscle that kind of comes out this way. We have another here, and another muscle group there. So because of that structure, legs are more curved on the outside and straighter on the inside, with a little bit of a bump there, depending on how muscular the character is. And she looks pretty muscular, so I would imagine there's going to be that little muscle right on the inside there. All right. So coming back to the arms and the hands. The arms, I think I mentioned this with another piece here. The arms, the lower arms and the upper arms are equal in size, and they're both slightly bigger than the head. So if I measure her head here, and I measure from the shoulder here, the elbow should be right about there. And it looks like it almost is. And the upper arm and lower arm are equal in size. So that means her wrist should be right about there. And it looks like it kind of is. And with the same size there, if we go... her elbow should maybe be here. So it looks like the left arm and the right arm don't look like they're the same size. And with this little lighting effect, I'm not quite sure what the hand is doing over here, so I'm just going to make something up. That's something. Actually, I changed my mind. I hate all of that. I'm just going to make a very simple fist. Alright. So for measuring again, shoulder to the elbow. Forearm should be looking something like this. That's looking pretty good. Now, for the real thing I wanted to talk about above everything else is this hand. I've seen a lot of your art, Shaz, and you do a great job, but your weakness is still your hands. So let's hopefully we can fix that a little bit here today. So we have the staff that she's holding. So the way she's holding it, the knuckles, like the knuckles here, should be right about here. The first finger, you actually did a good job. The first finger is going to stick up just a little bit. Come back and then fold around. Actually, you know what? Let's see. Oh, I see. I see what's happening here. Okay. So if you're holding a staff like this and we see kind of the front of the knuckles, you're going to also see the front of the thumb. The front of the thumb there is going to sit right about here. It's going to go, excuse me, going to go across where the first two knuckles are there, or first two fingers. Which means our first finger is going to come up here and come down around here. Fold in. Our second finger, because it isn't going to stick up, it's going to kind of wrap around more solidly. That knuckle that's here for the first finger is going to be here for the second finger. And come down, fold around. Third finger is going to kind of do a very similar thing. Same thing with the pinky here. And because of this hand position, we're going to see kind of the padding here of the thumb. And that's going to come around like that. Get rid of that. So that doesn't look too bad. The only problem I'm having with it is that hand still looks really big, even though I kind of traced over what you had. It looks a little big, so I think what I'm going to do is shrink that hand a little bit. That looks a little bit more reasonable. Remember, if you're not quite sure, your hand from your palm to your fingertips is about as big as your face. So if I measure her palm size here, put that onto her face, and then double it, that seems about right. So I think that's a good hand size. Doesn't look too bad. The more I'm looking at this, if I'm looking at it on my screen just like this, if I do all my measurements again, I think I would lengthen the body just a tad. So we go one hand length down, two hand length. Yeah. I think that's about what I would do. Yeah. And I would put groin right about there, which put the waist, the belt or the waist right about there. I think that looks pretty good. And then the very, very last thing I would do is, it looks like her face is really, really low. So if we normally put our eyes right in the middle of the head. So if the face was looking straight ahead, that's about where the eye line would be. Now, if she's kind of looking down, giving you kind of like a mean glare, the eye line is going to be different. Well, it is going to be different, but it's going to be lower. And I think it's going to be, but you don't want it too low, or else it's going to look like she has all forehead and not really much face. So if I had her looking down, I'd probably put her new eye line about there. So if the eyebrows would be there, the eye line would be here-ish. Her hair would be here, nose there. I'd probably keep the nose and the mouth the same spot. Yeah, something like that. So I think in a nutshell, that's this piece. I'm pretty sure you're not here today, Shaz, but feel free to message me if you have any questions after you see this, assuming you see it. If anyone else has any questions about what I just talked about, now's a good time to ask. And let's see. What other pieces do we have? We got one. Oh, that's my piece. So we've talked this one. We've done Spider-Man. We've done Vampirella. We've done Comic Page. We've done Shao's. So last but not least, we got Basketball by Doug here. So let me get this ready to go. And then we'll get talking. So while I get this ready, what do you think about the lighting effect? Oh, on this piece, the lighting effect? On the lighting effect down here? Overall, I think it's a nice effect. I personally would like the lighting effect to have some kind of form inside of it, like see like a little bit of a shadow of fingers, so it feels like the energy is coming from the hand instead of the energy just covering up the hand. Kind of like if you look at any like the old Jack Kirby drawings, like any of his Celestials, Silver Surfer, Galactus, any of those like cosmic creatures that were always shooting energy out of their hands, it always felt like that energy was coming from the hand. It didn't feel like the energy was covering up the hand. So I really, really like this energy effect. It actually reminds me a little bit of Kirby, some Kirby Crackle, but it just feels like it's covering up the hand. It doesn't. It doesn't feel like it's coming from the hand. And it wouldn't take much to change it. All you would need is to, in the lighting effect, just add a little bit of a shadow, indicating where the fingers might be. I usually, whenever I do an effect like that, I usually like to draw... hold on. I usually kind of like to draw like basically where the fingers would be. like the fingertips, I should say. So here's our 4 fingers, and here's the thumb. And then kind of draw the lighting effects around it. And here's like the forearm. Look at this award-winning drawing going on here. But yeah, this is like the forearm, the shoulders, and the energy coming from the hand. That's the kind of thing I would like. Do the shadows on the underside fight the lighting effect? Oh, hold on. Whoops. I don't know why he went away from it. Let's see. Does the lighting, do the shadows on the underside fight the lighting effect of the hand in your position? Oh, of the way I drew it here? Well, let me read this again. Or the ambient light still cast a shadow on the underside. That's a tough question to answer, because there's a lot going on here with lighting. Because I'm not 100% sure the lighting effect. If I understand your question right, okay. So you're, just to make sure I'm understanding your question. So you're asking, is the lighting effect from the hand affecting the shadows on her chest, in relationship to like the ambient light? Is that kind of what you're asking? And by the ambient light, like the light from the fire, is that what you're asking? I always hate the lag in these. I ask a question, you never know how long I should allow for questions to be answered. So the light coming from the bottom right. Well, in my opinion, it doesn't feel like the lighting effect from the hand is a strong enough light source to overpower the entire room being filled with fire. It's like turning on a flashlight in a tanning bed. Like, how much of a difference is that going to really make? So, I think he did a good job with having the really strong light source here, because that's right where the hand is. It's right next to that leg, and so that's a very bright light source. Also, right next to the hand here, it's much brighter. But because I don't think the light source here is strong enough to affect the lighting up on the chest, especially since this room is filled with fire. So I think having the fire all around here and having the shadow fall mostly on the center line of a lot of the figure, I think is probably a good approach. Where I would... what I would do, though, the difference I would make is the way he lit this background. He has the sky very dark and the fire very light. I would still keep the shadows very much where they are, except for anything that's closer to the fire, I would actually make a little bit brighter. So, for instance, like he has the shadows on the underside of the chest. I would actually put the shadows on the upper part of the chest here, because of the fire lighting here, and it doesn't look like there's any light source coming from the top. And maybe there is, but it doesn't seem like there is. So I would actually light everything from the bottom. So I'd put the shadow here, put the shadow like on the nose up here, underneath on the cheek here, on the top of the head, instead of having looks like a light's coming this way. I wouldn't have that. I would do mostly shadow on the top. And it looks like in some places he's doing that. Like we have the bottom of the hair here highlighted, and we have the fire highlights on the underside of the arms and the chest there. So that's there. I think all I would do is make the shadows more pronounced on the top of the form. And maybe make things a little bit brighter, like down here on this leg. I would make this probably more yellow from the fire. Probably a heavier shadow on top here. Make it lighter on this back leg, since it's going into the fire, or the light source of the fire more. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. That makes sense. Thanks. Okay, but if you want me to elaborate more, I have no problem doing that. So while I wait for a reply that I'm sure I'll get, let me finish getting this last drawing ready. And I saw your comment, Doug. It's not going to take a half hour. This is have a little more confidence in yourself. This isn't bad at all. But just like all of us, we can get better. All right. Do a quick stretch. All right. Okay. So I don't see a reply yet, but that doesn't mean one's not coming. But I'm gonna start on this one, and if another question comes in the chat, I'll interrupt myself to answer it. All right. So Doug, this actually looks really good and is pretty ambitious to have the foreshortening happening here. I was not brave enough to do foreshortening for a long time. So what you got going on here that's really good is just like I've mentioned a couple times already, really good line of action. We have the way that the body here, we have this really nice curves going on here. It's not, it would have been too easy to just have the arms going straight up like this, and then have the body going straight up like this, and then just having, you know, the two legs just going out like this. Like that, I've seen it 100 times, and it's easy to do. So the fact that you have these curves happening here between the arms, the body, the legs are creating their own line of action going this way, like that's really good. That makes for a very strong pose. I bet you the proportions are pretty good. Let me check here. So we got the bottom of our head, the top of our head here. So next head length down, it's a little off because his head's down, but the chest should be there, and it looks like it is, okay. And then from there, the waist should be there, and it is, good. And then the next head length down should be mid-thigh. Obviously the legs are out, so I'm going to measure that distance, tilt it on its side, mid-thigh, yep, that's good. So next head length down should be the bottom of the knee. Yep, that's the bottom of the knee. If I measure from the knee to the hips, should be the same from the knees to the ankle. That's right there, so pretty close. It's slightly off, but it's pretty close. And if we measure our head here, shoulders to the elbow, that's about right. And then shoulders to the wrist. So it looks like the forearms are just a little short. Not by a lot, but just a little short. So pretty good proportions there, so that's great. So we got good gesture, good line of action, and good proportions. So the biggest weakness that is calling out to me here is not necessarily the muscle structure themselves, but the way, the ordering of the muscles. Like um, how they connect to each other. So we'll start with this leg here. So you got your foot here, and that's fine. That works. And we have that overlapping our calf, our lower muscle, or our lower leg, like our shins and our calves. So this calf muscle here is a little lumpy. Could just smooth that out a little bit and that'll be fine. But whenever we do anything extremely foreshortening, every part as it gets further away from us has to get overlapped by the part that comes before it. So this foot overlaps our shin and calf, which you got that. So that's good. Now this, the shin and calves have to overlap the knee. So the way you have it here, it looks like the kneecap here, it looks like you're overlapping the calf a little bit, and you want to go the other way. So you want the knee to be behind the calf there. And then it looks like, oops, all right. And then it looks like kind of the same thing is happening. Hold on. Got my layers mixed up. There we are. All right, so you have this, then you have your knee that sits behind it, and then you want your thighs to sit behind that. So it looks like you have your thigh kind of going in front of the knee there. So it's just a very simple change, just making sure that the thigh there sits behind the knee and sits behind the calf there. But you have this part right. You have the thigh overlapping the hips here. Now, since we've been talking about muscle structure, I would have the underside here just a little bit flatter. And because the leg is kind of coming up, the way I just drew this, the leg looks a little broken. So what I would do is actually raise this up a little bit. Oops. Raise this up to maybe about here. And then to keep the leg looking straight, I would just rotate this up here and go that way. Maybe give this a slight rotation down. Do that. Yeah, that looks good. All right. And same thing here. I would probably keep this leg a little bit flatter on the underside and a little bit more curved on the top. Now this one doesn't have as much foreshortening, so we don't have to worry about the layering as much. But here's actually, since we're looking at the side of this leg, here's actually a good tip. When we look at the side of our leg, it actually makes the letter S. I'm going to over-exaggerate here. So if I make like an S shape like that, that's the shape our leg takes from the side. So it's going to be more curved on top and then more curved on the bottom here and a little bit, and then flat on the opposite sides, or flatter. Hope that's making sense so far. Now when it comes to these arms coming up here, again, the overall shape is good, it's just the layering looks a little bit off. So since the arms are kind of pointed up this way. The shoulders are going to be slightly behind the head, which you kind of have. And then it's going to go into the chest muscles. Now, I know you can't really see the chest with the shirt he's wearing, but I'm going to draw them in anyway here. All right, good. I'm glad this is making sense. And so then we have our triceps and our biceps here. So that's looking just fine. The shape is just slightly off because our triceps are, especially when our arms are straight, the triceps kind of bunch up at the top of the arm and then kind of taper down. So you have the overall shape right. I would just put a little more emphasis on the bump being towards the bottom there. And then our forearms kind of do a weird thing because they kind of connect on the side of our arms and they go above, they connect to our upper arm a little bit higher, and our bicep goes a little bit lower than our forearm. Every part of our body like overlaps. Like there's no part of our body that just it meets with each other and that's it. They kind of interconnect. So when it comes to our arms, part of the forearm connects above our bicep, and our bicep goes down a little bit lower. So based on that, since this is kind of the underside of our arm here, the elbow is probably going to be right about there, which means forearm is going to do something like this. And the elbow is going to be about there. The tricep muscles are probably going to do this sort of thing. Actually, I'm going to turn this completely upside down to make this a little bit easier on myself. So we have our tricep here. Our triceps go right into our elbows. So we have our elbow here, tricep muscle there, bicep here, forearm connects to the side. Oops. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Now hopefully everyone watching notices how I didn't change a whole lot. I just kind of put in a little bit more structure. I with a little bit of knowledge of the exact shape of the muscles, you get a stronger looking arm. Not just stronger because it's more muscular, but stronger. It looks more anatomically correct. But you'll notice that I didn't change a lot about the shape. The shape is still there from the original. It's just how is it structured? Like, okay, let me do. We're going to draw overception here. Let's do this in red. Because you'll notice on this forearm, the way I drew it, it goes over the bicep on this side. And that's exactly what Doug's did too. It goes over on this side. But he also has that same part of the arm going over the bicep on this side when, in fact, the tricep should be overlapping in that section. So it's really small, subtle things like that that make your drawing go from looking just okay to looking really good. And it could be the smallest thing, the smallest little curve, just having the arms or legs overlap each other in the proper way. Just a small change like that will make a huge difference. So let's see. The very last thing I want to mention with this drawing, just because it's been bothering me as I've been drawing here, and this is probably isn't fair of me to say because I know this isn't a finished drawing; it's more of a sketch. But the fact that our main character here is missing his ears has been bothering me while I've been drawing, so I'm going to throw in his ears here. Now, since actually this is a good thing to talk about. So since our character is looking down, the eyes, nose, and mouth are going to look lower on the face. They're going to appear to be lower on the face. But even when that happens, the ears are still in the middle. And so in this instance, because all the parts of the face are moving down and the ears don't move its location, the ears are going to appear to be higher on the face. So, yeah, that looks pretty good. And I guess the only other thing, since we have been talking about muscles, since the chest muscles are going to come in here, the lat muscles, the back muscles, we're going to see a lot more of that. And I know that's kind of what when you drew this part here in the body, that's kind of what you were thinking about. And you drew it. The abs would be about here. So then we have... This might not be fair to critique because you didn't draw in the muscles, but I figured it can't hurt to talk about a little bit. There we go. We got our slam dunking guy. So, Doug, if you have any questions, I see you in the chat there. So, if you have any questions, if you want me to elaborate on anything, if anything didn't make sense, or it did make sense, but you just want me to go into more detail about it, or if I just didn't go into enough detail about something, if I skimmed over it too quickly, let me know. Now's a good time for that. And that's actually all the drawings. So I'm going to open it up to you guys. If you guys have any questions, if you want me to elaborate on anything that I talked about on your piece or anyone else's pieces, if you want me to just... I've scheduled until 11. I can go a little bit longer. But if you want me to actually just talk about something in general, I can talk about it real quick. I want you guys who so patiently and graciously been watching, I want to give you guys a chance to say your piece. So now's a good time. And while I wait for chats to come in, and those questions to come in, I'll let you guys know what I plan to do is take all these drawings, all these over drawings that I've done, and post them to Twitter, so you guys can download them off my Twitter to help you guys out. If you want to take my over drawings and kind of help them improve your stuff. So I don't know if I'm going to get them up tonight, but sometime tomorrow I'll get them up on my Twitter, and you can just download them from there. Yeah. I think we'll leave it at that. And again, I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. I'm not going to just run away. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to ask whatever questions. Yeah. Thanks so much for the critique. I really appreciate it. Maybe there can be a future tutorial on musculature. Yeah, I totally do a musculature tutorial. Maybe I'll do that next week. I love drawing muscles. I think they're a lot of fun. So yeah, I would gives me an excuse to draw muscles, and if you guys can learn a thing or two, then great. And I guess we can use this time too. Any of you guys watching, if you guys have any requests for a future Tutorial Tuesday, leave them in the chat. I would love to get some requests, know what you guys want to learn about, and I will happily work that into my schedule. Some quick tips about shading cloth to show folds. That's something I tried on the Vampirella bit. Not a lot about it. Can you tell me how that worked out on the left side of the pic? Alright, let me look here at Vampirella here. Okay. For the most part, that works. I think I still have the original photo up here. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. Kayla definitely had a very shiny material for her costume, which makes it a little awkward to shade. Let's see. How would I approach this if I was doing it? She also has a crazy light source on her. It's just the sun, but it's so strong it's creating weird shadows. Okay. And I guess I should just show. So, I keep talking about this reference picture. So this is what I'm looking at. Hold on. Okay, so this is the reference I'm looking at. This is what the Green Count was working off of. So the cosplayer is Kayla Aaron, if you guys were interested. So if I'm doing just clothing in general, man, this is tough to do on the spot. I think what's important more than anything is just showing the general values. So when I'm looking at how you approach this, I just see a flat red and then kind of like a cell shaded shadow and a cell shaded ish light area. So what I would actually do, bear with me, I'm doing this on the fly. So I would have this whole area start with the flat red that I'm sure you probably started with. Forgive me for not coloring inside the lines. So once I kind of put in the flat colors, if I'm doing fabric, the most important thing is just making sure that the shape of the fabric and the volume of the fabric that it's covering comes through. So what I would probably do next is then just take a little airbrush tool, shadow color probably a good purple. And since the shadow's on the underside here, I'd probably hit that there. Probably a little bit of a shadow there. pick a nice highlight color, probably a nice yellow since we're working with red here. Kind of hit where the brighter spots are going to be. And then get my airbrush, or not my airbrush, eventually airbrush, my lasso tool, and wherever I want hard shadows to be. Now I'm not following the reference here, I'm just kind of speaking generally, because the material from the reference is very shiny and a little difficult to do on the fly here. Kind of that shadow there. And then, since there are maybe some folds, I'd probably maybe lasso where some distinct folds might be. I am kind of making this up as I go, but hopefully this will help. And then just hit that with an airbrush. And then we can have some folds, and then depending on the fabric, if it is a little bit on the shinier side, I maybe hit where the highlights would be on that. Maybe wherever any kind of highlights in the folds might be. Maybe any edges. Something like that. That's not a perfect example, concerning the how skimpy Vampirilla's costume is. There's not a lot of folds to work with, but hopefully that gave you an idea of how to approach clothing and folds in general. Alright, good. I'm glad that makes sense. Alright. I guess I'm going to say last call for anyone who has any questions. I'll wait a minute or two. You like the airbrush? Yeah. The airbrush with lasso is how I do most of my coloring. Sometimes I might use like a watercolor brush if I want to have a more painterly look. But if I want like that, classic, I say classic, but like your comic book coloring look, I just use airbrush with lasso. It gives you the hard edges, it gives you soft edges. It's relatively quick to work with. It's a pretty good technique. Yeah. So, I'm not quite sure what my next tutorial is going to be. I like the idea of muscles. If you guys have suggestions, will be happy to look at them, consider them, put them on my schedule. My next stream for sure is going to be Saturday. I don't know what I'm going to do that Saturday yet. I don't know if I'm going to work on commissions or if I'll maybe take mini commissions for the stream, or if I'll work on my comics. What I also might do on Friday is either Thursday in the afternoon or Friday evening, I might just do work on my comics live stream where I probably won't be on camera or turn on my mic. I'll just draw, listen to music, and you guys can come join me and watch me draw, ask questions, and I'll answer in the chat. Yeah. If you liked what I do, I'm gonna shill one more time. There's Patreon, there's Ko-fi, There's PayPal. You can follow me. And I really had a good time. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I would like to do this again. So I'm probably not going to do it right away. I want to, do some other stuff in between. But maybe like once a month. I would love to do this like once a month. So, yeah. And I think with that, guys, unless I'll give you guys one more second to throw in any other questions, and then I think I'm gonna call it a day. Thank you, everyone. I had a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed yourself. Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.